Hi, my name is Speciale. I am a pianist, a teacher, a conductor. I teach music at Loyola High School. And I'm here today to share some of the things that I do in my classes, as well as some of the music that I perform, and talk about how I've integrated electronic music projects and sound art in a constructivist way into my music appreciation curriculum. But to kind of kick things off, I'm gonna play a tiny suite of 4 pieces by Karl-Heinz Essel, and this is called Listen Thing. Each of the 4 pieces has its own title, which I will read before I play each one, and there's kind of a surprise at the end. I'll give you a hint and let you know that the first 3 pieces are somehow related to the final piece. Listen Thing, Tingle Hints. Shingle Tint. Lent in Sight. Silent Night. The reason I chose these 4 pieces is it's kind of what I try to do in my classes. Hopefully I do it as elegantly as Dr. Essel did. But to take something that is relatively familiar and approachable and presented in a way that's different and kind of exciting and that calls attention to something that you might not have paid attention to before just by looking at it in a new way. And that's something that I think sound art and a lot of contemporary music can do for my students. So I try to include, well, I also find that this area of repertoire is neglected in most traditional music appreciation classes. So I mentioned at the beginning that I try to be very constructivist, and what that means is I want the kids to have the experience of making music, and that means both performing and composing and kind of getting their hands dirty with the materials of music. The challenge for me was it's a music appreciation class. It is a sort of a general ed class. The kids that take it aren't necessarily musicians. They don't necessarily have any kind of training, and it's really the purpose of the class to introduce them to music. So I presume that they have no knowledge. So the question might come up, why do something that's very sophisticated and kind of intimidating with kids that don't have any experience, and then much less expect them to create it themselves? Well, a couple things make this possible for them. One is technology. The advent of very powerful mobile technology, and I teach at Loyola High School. We were very fortunate to have computers donated to us. So I have a computer lab, but most of what I do doesn't require a tremendous number of computers. There's also open source software and a whole community out on the internet that's very willing to help make these things possible. Some of the things that I've used are computer languages like Pure Data and Max. More Pure Data because it's free. Instruction on the internet helped me to learn to do some basic programming and pass these things on to the kids. So finding the technical resources is fairly simple on the internet. What's quite a bit trickier is figuring out how to integrate it into a class in a consistent and interesting way. Let me show you some of the things that we've done. What I'd like to do is sort of walk you through some of the processes. I spent a lot of time sort of building up their background knowledge and trying to get them open and accepting of things that are kind of intimidating. So one thing we did was, based on the work of the composer Pauline Oliveros, we do a lot of listening meditative exercises. Just learning how to pay attention to sound and to maybe experience the world around us in a new way, and call attention to the qualities of sound and the varieties of sound around us. So after sort of building up that awareness and doing some practicing, practice listening and practice listening in the space wherever we are, even homework, to go home and journal about sound. We do it for increasing durations of time. And then we go out into the yard and spend about 10 minutes listening, and very intently and critically, to all the sounds that we hear. And what I had them do is journal and write down just everything they could possibly perceive, and to categorize it as sound that's close to them, sounds that are sort of distant, and then the furthest sounds away from them that they could even perceive. And then we went back into the classroom, and we were learning about scores, what a musical score does, what its function is, and how things beyond traditional music notation might convey aspects of music that are very difficult to notate with just dots and dashes. And so we learned about graphic scores, and I had them construct graphic scores based on this listening exercise. So here's a few of them. I thought they were pretty interesting, especially since this is a music class, not a visual arts class. So here's one example. It's kind of a sound flower, and it's very creative, wavy lines, even some words. It's multicolored. Words that describe, it says talking here, vehicular acceleration, wing flap. Kind of attractive and sort of provocative. I'm not sure what the arrows mean and all these things, but clearly a lot of thought went into this score, into notating what happened in this student's experience. Here's another very complex and interesting visual score. It almost looks like some sort of a sea creature or something. But he came up with his own sort of modified musical notation and this interesting staff with colors and dashes, lines. Now these students all heard the same thing, and so I was really pleased with the variety of scores that they were able to come up with, that they were very individual. This one's almost kind of like pop art. It's got multiple perspectives, clicking of a pen. It's almost kind of comic booky. And it almost sort of captures multiple moments of time by the way he used images. Passing cars as seen from overhead, smoke. So they're very visual, very evocative. Finally, this one looks like it's vertical. This one was interesting for its sort of boxed. There's Japanese, there's writing, imagery, different shaped lines, lots of color, all notating that sonic experience. What we then did was kind of flip that around and think about and learn about music that used graphic scores. And then, because of simple technologies and free software, we were able to do a very creative project. I gave them the task of designing a graphic score that was also an instrument. And we were able to accomplish this with the use of a couple of things. One was a theremin pencil. It's a regular pencil, HB lead, and we strapped a circuit board onto it with a battery and a little speaker. With copper tape, we attached both ends of the pencil and wrapped the pencil with something that's conductive. And then a simple push pin was run through the copper tape on top into the graphite. So now the graphite, which is also conductive, is connected to this circuit board. So students were asked to design scores using just graphite, and they had to think of a couple things. Because the scores have to communicate something about the music that they were composing, and they also had to be the instrument that is being played. So I thought this one was relatively successful. We made sort of a monster, and because of all the textures on it, it's pretty clear that you're supposed to keep your finger here on this large bit of graphite, and then you draw on the monster and you add to the monster with the pencil. You add to its monstrousness, and as you pass the graphite over the various textures, different rhythms, for example, come out over these sort of train track-like figures. As you increase the amount of lead between in the circuit, because of Ohm's law, it changes the impedance and it changes the pitch of the instrument. So you get a variety of sounds out of this. You can see that the graphite is all connected. But this is also a very limited instrument. So one way that we were able to get more variety was with mobile technology. There's a wonderful company called RJDJ, and they publish, or they create software that acts as a host for pure data patches. Pure data being the computer language I mentioned earlier. So by hacking through some patches and using their little app creator, we're able to make custom patches and load samples onto mobile devices that will then modify the sounds that come out of their scores further and give it a bit more interest. So I will play this student's monster piece. So that's an example. We probably made 60 of these things. So with a very, very limited device, we can get a variety of sounds and introduce them to a completely different aesthetic and noise world. That has plenty of. I mean, we go through plenty of examples of other composers that do similar things. but they're able to really personalize it and make it their own and experiment with all kinds of different media to make these projects. While we're on the subject, I also teach them to do things like soldering, and we make musical objects. Now this object is one that I made as an example, but it's for an actual piece. This is for Nothing Is Real by Alvin Lucier, where fragments of the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever are recorded and then immediately replayed into a teapot that you wire with some speakers. And then there are moments in the score where the lid is lifted and closed, and you play the overtones that are generated by the roundness of the teapot. But learning to solder, we can make our own microphones, like this, simple piezo discs, and we solder them and fabricate our own microphones, which I can then send home with the kids so that they can do sampling at their house. And we make all kinds of things out of found sounds, things that they find. You can record things that you can't otherwise hear by placing a contact mic on it, like an air conditioner or sounds in the car. This, by the way, is another one of our projects. It's a music box kit, and we've punched out things. Now this is one that's prefab, and I brought this to help sort of explain the Silent Night piece that I played at the beginning. I mentioned that all the other pieces were derived or were related to Silent Night, and I wanted to give you a more concrete demonstration of how that worked. The way this works is when you punch holes into a strip, there's a series of tines, each of which plays one pitch, and as this goes through in time, it plays them in order, and depending on where it is, it will play a different pitch. And so I've put this very familiar song in upside down, and that's kind of what Karl-Heinz Essel did. He took the piece that you heard right side up at the end and played it upside down, and then maybe put this end in first upside down and ran it backwards and upside down. And so he eked out another 4 versions of the piece, and then played Silent Night at the end. So I will play this for you very quickly, and then play it right side up so you can hear what it's like. So it's tinkly and attractive, but right side up it's significantly more recognizable. So hopefully that's a clear illustration of what happened in the listen thing piece. It's the exact same concept of flipping those notes around. You might notice the piezo mic attached here. We also took things that we made, punched into these cards and ran them through a computer, much in the way that we did with these score pieces to further modify sound. What I'd like to do is play a final piece on toy piano. This is my arrangement of John Cage's piece Dream. Dream was written in 1948 as a solo piano piece. And in honor of Cage's 100th birthday, I'd like to play it for you on the toy piano. The reason toy piano is important with John Cage is he was the first composer to ever write a piece for toy piano. and so he's always associated with it. Now you'll notice I have a computer here and this thing with lights on it. That's because the toy piano doesn't sustain very well. So I've used some electronics to provide some of the sustaining sounds, and I've included samples of toy piano as well as a real piano to echo the original sound of the piece. So this is Dream by John Cage.